tag. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the green room for DisrupTV. We won't be talking about generative AI or ChatGPT, we think. And more importantly, we won't be talking about what's going on with tech companies in the market. No, actually, we will. Hey, we're going to do some quick introductions. I'm here with my amazing co-host founder, Vala Afshar. We've got our amazing producer here as well, Elle, and of course, some great guests. So, Paulo, what are we talking about today? Where are you coming in from?
Thank you for hosting me. I'm going to talk about my book, The Full Workarounds, and I'm an associate professor at Oxford University.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you for coming in from Oxford and during pub time. Dheeraj, what time? Where are you in? What time zone are you in? Hopefully, no, just kidding. You're not in Oxford.
I'm right here in,
what are you talking about today, and what are we talking about? So,
we're talking about I'm right here in Palo Alto, and we're going to talk about the role of AI in all things enterprise. It's the du jour. Yeah. And before this, I was at Nutanix, so we'll talk about some other things about entrepreneurship too.
Yeah, no, it's amazing stuff around business, entrepreneurship, and the stuff you've been doing through different startups. So thank you. So Jason, where are we coming in from? What are we talking about?
We're coming in from downtown Palo Alto, the old heart of startups and software, having abandoned our San Francisco office a while back. And we're only going to talk about AI. No. We're going to talk about, I guess we're going to talk about venture capital, fundraising, what's happening in innovation in today's world, and maybe a little bit about community and SaaSter and thousands of founders getting together.
Hey, nothing better than that. So we're in the heart of innovation. Well, hey, that's where we are. We're going to jump in. For those following around, please definitely check out our handles. And Elle, take it away.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions live using #DisrupTV, and we'll do our best to answer them in the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. He's on TV every day. I see him on Bloomberg, CNN, Fox. He's a sought-after keynote speaker. In my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot with my amazing co-host, Paulo Savaget, who is the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce, but he's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets, and when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analyses on ZDNet. But as we say every week, it's not about our amazing backgrounds, it's about our amazing guests and the people that come down the show. And who do we have to kick it off today?
It's always about the guest, and we're thrilled to have Jason Lemkin, a 2X founder who now runs SaaSter, the world's largest community for B2B SaaS founders, and is the managing director of SaaSter Fund, a $150 million venture capital firm focused on early stage enterprise investments. SaaSter's goal is to help business leaders get from 0 to 100 million ARR with less stress and more success. I love that. Jason has led or sourced the first VC investments in many leading enterprise SaaS startups, Collectively, Ray, get a hold of this. Collectively, the startups that Jason has invested in have evaluations of over $1 billion.
No, that's old school.
2 billion, 3 billion. What is it, Jason?
No, probably 16 billion today.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah, I got
So we need to update some websites.
Internet ages. You know, it's a weird,
internet
weird
ages.
thing.
I'm going to send you the links.
GPT
I apologize.
2020.
That's amazing. Wow. Stunning. SaaStr has been named
Stunning.
one of the top 100 blogs for entrepreneurs by Forbes, one of the 50 best websites for entrepreneurs by Inc. magazine. Jason has been named by Business Insider the 32 most powerful big people in business technology. I don't think that's old, but it's true.
People shake. When I type, they shake. That's powerful. What I think is that powerful. There's just an echo.
Oh, I love that. Before SaaStr and VC investing, Jason was CEO and co-founder of EchoSign, the web's most popular electronic signature service. From inception through its acquisition through Adobe. Prior to EchoSign and Adobe, Jason was co-founded one of the only successes in nanotechnology, nanogram devices, which was acquired for $50 million just in 13 months after it was founded. The technology built into implantable power cells has gone on to help extend the lives of thousands. You can follow Jason on Twitter. Awesome follow on Twitter, JasonLK. Welcome, Jason, to DisrupTV. I had to cut your bio short. We only have 20 minutes.
And I gotta update that bio. It's a good one, but I gotta get it a little more succinct and brought down to 2023.
Totally. To my apologies.
No,
it's okay. ChatGPT is running at 2021, so we're still doing okay.
Yeah,
hey, welcome. You know, this is an amazing time to talk, right? I mean, we've seen what's been going on with valuations. We've seen what's going on with liquidity for startups and founders. And the VC market is, you know, it's kind of weird at the moment. It's a little scary. Like things are kind of empty in Sandhill, right? Things are actually, people are like looking for cash, you know, banks are going away. Like what is happening in the funding environment and what's really changed in the past 6 months?
Well, look, they're two different. They sound like one question. I think they're two different questions.
Yes, they are.
If you're on Twitter, if you're on social media, you're going to hear about interest rates and ZERP and LERP and WERP and QUERP and all this kind of stuff. None of it really matters for funding. All that matters is multiples. What multiple of revenue are cloud and SaaS leaders trading at? And we are 30% below the average of the last 6 years, 7 years. We're below the average. We have fallen. We're not just average. We have not just fallen back to the multiples of 2018 or 2019. We have fallen back to the multiples of 2015 and 2016. And a lot of us, you know, day to day, we didn't used to think about multiples, right? In the old days, going back with three of us, multiples were terrible. They were terrible at Salesforce. They were terrible. They were always terrible. Like it was terrible. You'd be lucky to go public at a billion. When I started in SaaS, Salesforce had a market cap of $2 billion, and that seemed like a lot, right? When Box IPO'd, when HubSpot IPO'd, they struggled to be worth $1 billion, right? And then everything got really good, and then it got really, really good multiples from 2018 to 2019, and then it went batshit whatever, something insane in 2021, and we haven't just snapped back to 2018 or 19 or even 17. We're really low, and all what that simply means is it's much, much, much harder for VCs to imagine they're really going to make money. Okay. And when that doesn't happen, everything slows down. It slows down the least in seed because you can still believe at a tiny valuation. And then the later stage you go, it slows down. And it's just natural. It is just natural. And I was talking with one of the best startups I've invested in and going to triple this year. Okay. On an insane path, no macro downturn, no anything. And a top VC turned them down. And I just asked why. That's cool. Right. I mean, it happens all the time these days. Like, well, I was looking the other day at PagerDuty. It's only worth $2 billion. Like it's not worth enough. I can't justify investing at this company at a tenth the price anymore. And so it's just percolating we can talk about all these things and we can talk about LP and liquidity and all these things. But if multiples snap back to where they were even in 2018 to 2019, all will be good again. It will all be good again. But the weird thing is, if you look, we're actually like 2022 was a knife drop, right? Multiples and everything fell along with the markets. It's actually been pretty steady this year. Multiples are pretty steady, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It might mean we're stuck in these crummy multiples for a long time, and that's the meta question for VCs. And so to some extent, it's bleeding optimism out of the system, and realism has creeped in.
So with realism creeping in, one of your most recent articles, you answered the question, how can a company compete with a company that has unlimited capital? what do you do then? How are you coaching, mentoring, sponsoring founders? Like, what's top of mind for them, and how are you getting them to adjust to these changes that we haven't seen in a decade?
It's brutal. It is brutal. It is because we were taught, everyone learned horrific habits in 2021, including public companies, mind you, right? Every public company overhired. It's just, it was worse for startups. It was worse for startups. And we began to come up with metrics for startups like, it was okay as long as, you know, you're burning twice as much as you're adding in bookings when there's capital is free. But if you think about it for a minute, that's not sustainable, is it? You can't burn twice as much cash as you're booking. It has to be inverted. Best case, you have to be burning a fraction of the capital you're booking if you ever hope to be a sustainable model. So we've learned these terrible lessons. Sales efficiency became terrible. Marketing returns became terrible, and we're still unlearning them. And look, for startups, the lesson is it's either brutal or it's calm and simple. It's like, probably you have all the cash you're going to get.
Yeah.
And that sound to the three of us, that sounds obvious. Hey, that's the way it used to be until 2020. You raised some money, and if you were lucky, you got more. And if you weren't, you made your allowance last as long as it could, right? And then it got inverted in 2021. Each round became easier. It became easier, which has never happened in our lifetimes. Even good times, 2018, 2017, the next round was always harder. It had to be harder, right? It had to be harder, but it got inverted in 2021 where it got easier. And so everyone in that environment, everyone learned the wrong lessons. Everyone learned the wrong lessons. And everyone's got to make do with what they have. And hopefully, again, multiples will rebound even just 20 to 30%. If each dollar of revenue is valued 20 to 30% more, that's enough to make most VC math work, but it just is broken today. It is broken today. If some startup wants to raise, that's doing great, wants to raise a 200, 300 million valuation, but deep down, you only think it's going to be worth 500, you can't afford to invest. It doesn't matter if you love the founders. It doesn't matter. You just can't make enough money. And people think VCs make so much money. The truth is the IRRs, the numbers are not that great. You've got to beat NASDAQ, and it's very, very difficult.
You know, it's a really good point, right? The issue about what's on the back end, right? What's on the back end of the pipe, right? And almost everybody doesn't realize the back end of the pipe dictates everything else. You're working backwards all the way down to where you are, and those valuations are crushing everybody. So as a founder, then, you know, what should I be focused on at the moment if I'm a founder right now? I got my cash, right? You know, is that all I'm going to get on the allowance? What are the metrics? What are people looking for on the back end to say there's growth? Because that story you just told about where, you know, they're doing like, you know, 3x. I mean, that's horrible if they can't actually find someone on the back end of that pipe.
Well, look, I think I'll use a trite term and then we can dig into it. It's back to basics. Okay. First of all, let's step back for a minute. Even if you're a public company or private company or startup, how do you, in cloud and SaaS, how do you get cash flow positive? Forget about profitable. How do you do it? How do you make this work? Well, let's step back for a minute. The old days beauty of software, going back to the Intuit, Adobe, Microsoft days, is a couple of smart engineers they each have their own office. They work really hard. They put a piece of software on a DVD or something, and then millions of people use it, and it's wildly profitable. And Adobe today still has almost 50% operating margins, and Microsoft's are insane, right? And so you have to find something. And what was cheap? Well, look, it was a handful of engineers, right? And very efficient distribution channels. Now we've gotten into the world where everything has become inefficient, right? Engineering is extremely expensive, sales is extremely expensive, and marketing is extremely expensive. If all three are expensive, all the categories, right, in a public company or private, you'll never get efficient. So the simple answer is something's got to give. If your product's very viral, it can still be you can still be wildly effective today, even if sales is expensive and you have 1,000 engineers, right? If you're hyper efficient on engineering, you know, the classic Instagram or WhatsApp, you can get away with a lot of Slack in other places, right? Or if sales is super efficient, but not everything has to be efficient, but one of those three has to be hyper efficient. And so founders have to reflect about how can I do that is number one, right? And we could dig it. And the second point to remember is what people really did outside of 2021 when they had a lot of money is, why do you raise $100 million? Why do you raise $200 million? Well, in 2021, it was because I hired 1,000 people, but that's the wrong reason. The real reason an efficient startup raises a ton of money is to play in categories where it's weak, to do dominant strategy. Salesforce does not need to spend any money in the categories where it already wins. You don't need to spend $1. They all find you, okay? It's called dominant. And startups can either stay in their lane where they're very, very good, or they can spend a ton of money to compete in verticals, in categories where they're either weak, right, or where they have nothing. And the truth is, if you have a brand like a Salesforce or whatever, you can actually do dominant. It works. Salesforce can launch any product they want, and if they throw enough money at it because of their brand, some customers are going to buy it, but it's wildly expensive, right? So I think we're all going to see a retreat from this dominant strategy, except for a few, right? Because there's no money, and everyone's going to have to play where you're strong, right? Where you win most deals and double down where you win. And that's very efficient as well, because those leads tend to be very cheap. Sales is very good at closing the customers that are exactly like the customers they closed last week. And engineering knows how to build those features, right? So we're going to retreat to our strengths is what's happening.
Let's take the line of business that I think is the hardest in any company, and that's sales, in my opinion. What does getting back to basics for sales mean to you as you're coaching these founders and guiding them? You wrote a recent article that said great VPs of sales never hide from a miss. Is back to basic translate to practicing radical transparency in terms of forecasting accuracy? And how are you coaching the sales function?
I think it all boils down to, again, we could talk about a lot of things, but like multiples, it all boils down to one thing in sales, which we lost track of in 2021, which is that sales reps need to close from 3 to 5 times what they take home. 3 times for SMB,
3 to
4 times for mid-market, 5 times at enterprise. And not just some of them, most, and ideally all. And it was tough, but Mark Benioff had a statement, a while ago saying they looked at the data and so many of the new sales hires at Salesforce had closed nothing. And we could analyze why that is. It could be training. It could be market changes. It's not that they weren't good people. Of course they were good people. But the reality is we don't have the room to hire folks that can't. Everyone's got to close 4 to 5x, right? 3 to 5x. And it's and the job of a VP of sales and CEOs and founders is to back solve into that. Okay. If that's what it's got to be, what does that mean? Does that mean we have fewer reps? Does that mean we change how we do sales operations? Does that mean we don't do categories where we don't win very often? Because the reality is, if you have a sales team and you want to go out and hunt new territory, you got to pay them like 1 time what they bring in. It's too hard. It's too hard to go compete with. I mean, I just got back from RSA. Hey, you go compete with Sentinel One. We have no customers. You better pay those sales reps 1x of what they bring in because it's too hard. But maybe we can't afford to do much of that today. We got to get back to basics, 3x to 5, and then the math is magical. It's the math. Sales should be profitable like they were in the old days, and they should not be a cost center. Done right.
What a novel concept.
Well, just infinite capital let everyone play dominant strategy, even if they didn't realize it. Infinite capital mean you didn't have to worry about efficiency. Infinite capital mean literally I wasn't at a single board meeting in 2021 where anyone asked about efficiency. Never
really.
Now it's the pendulum's cracked through the wall on the other side. Every meeting's about efficiency. No one even asks about your growth rate. It's efficiency. No one asks.
This is the year of efficiency.
Oh my gosh,
the question here really is, are we going to see a death in innovation though? As funding dries up, is there going to be like a gap of like 24 to 36 months where we are not going to see innovation in a category because there's no money in that space? Are we going to keep seeing the bigger companies get bigger as a result of that?
Well, I think it's both. I think we are seeing, it's a fun time to watch the cloud giants accelerate. Who would have thought Microsoft could come back and Azure could be number 2 and possibly even on the way to number 1? Who could have thought Microsoft and Google could be so successful? Who would have thought we could see the renaissance in Salesforce and so many other leaders? Or Oracle. Oracle's got its 3rd win. Where'd that come from? Right? I never would have thought. And so a lot of these and a lot of the money, and you guys know this even better than I do, a lot of the spending hasn't dried up in the enterprise. It's just become much more discriminatory and thoughtful, right? It's much harder, but and the money is going to the brands and the big. And yes, it's a bummer that Cloudflare went from 50% growth to 35% growth. That's still pretty good, right? I mean, Azure still grew 30-something%, right? But you'll meet with startups, and you know what? They booked nothing last quarter. Nothing.
I know. We bet some folks
nothing. Do you see a Cloudflare or a Page or do you pick or Azure? You don't see them growing 0. You don't see anybody growing 0, do you? But you see startup after startup after startup growing 0. But I don't think it's going to kill innovation. It's just going to be the death of these hyper inefficient startups, and the death of undifferentiated startups of the fifth player. We're probably not going to need the fourth or the fifth or the sixth or the seventh player in the space anymore, but it's okay, right? Software outside of OpenAI, so, 5 or 6 engineers should be able to get a 1.0 of anything out. And there is an infinite there are more sources of seed capital today than there ever have been in our lifetimes.
Yep.
There are more entrepreneurs who had big exits. There are more of this. There is some, even though capital dries up after seed stage, there are so many people that have money to invest in the next generation. It's almost actually inexhaustible, the amount of capital there is if you're an efficient seed startup, right? It's not that it's fair. It's not that it doesn't discriminate. It's not that it doesn't pattern match. Okay, it does. It's biased for Stanford grads and MIT grads and folks that graduated from Datadog and GitLab. But beyond the discriminatory, there's infinite pre-seed and seed capital. It's just infinite for breakout leaders. So there won't be a dearth of innovation. It's just going to be much harder to scale than it was.
Hey, we would be remiss not to talk about SaaStr, your big event coming up. What's happening then? What date is it, and what do you expect? I mean, it's quite a production. You gave me the numbers the other day, like how big it was. Like when we're sitting at the Rosewood, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I hadn't realized how big it had gotten. So,
yeah, we have 4,000 coming to our more informal event in London, June 6th to 7th. So that's SaaStr London or Europa, and then we'll have about 12,000 or so come to. Goodness gracious, I think it's the 9th SaaStr annual, September 6th to 8th in San Mateo. It's pretty fun. It's pretty unique. And it's just, everyone's there. There's plenty of CXOs and there's hundreds and hundreds of VCs, but really the core ICB is CEOs, founders from like 2 to 100 million in revenue, just sharing their learnings. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty amazing that all these years that the best of the best will come and just share their learnings again and again. It's kind of, you guys know this, but it's kind of magical that the best do this, isn't it?
It really is. It really
let us know how we can help again. If we're the same things you wanted to do, we're still in. Let me know. Count me in on that. We're in. All right. Very cool. I'll follow up. We're here with Jason Lemkin, SaaStr founder, Enthusiast, and VC. You can follow him on Twitter at JasonLK. And of course, check out the events in June and September. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the time, guys.
Cheers. Lots of nuggets of wisdom in that 20-minute section.
If you were a startup listening or an enterprise tech person, you'd be like, "Holy crap!"
It's amazing. It's a privilege for us to have Dheeraj Pandey, CEO and co-founder of DevRev. Dheeraj is a veteran entrepreneur, having had several CEO and EVP roles during his 20-plus-year long career in the software technology industry. Currently, Dheeraj is the CEO, co-founder of DevRev, a fully remote tech company with a platform that converges the silos of sales, marketing, support, and engineering to act as one. Every company needs to act as one in order to compete and win. Before launching DevRev, Dheeraj was founder, CEO, and chairman of Nutanix, a software company focused on hybrid cloud infrastructure, which was the most valuable IPO in 2016. Dheeraj currently serves as a board member at Adobe and sits on the board of advisors at his alma mater, University of Texas, Austin. You can follow Dheeraj on Twitter. He must have been an early adopter. I couldn't get Vala at Dheeraj, Dheeraj. Welcome, Dheeraj, to DisrupTV.
Thank you.
It's great to have you.
Hey, we're really excited to have you here. And, one of the hot topics here has really been where generative AI, open AI, diffusion models are headed. They're getting a lot of interest in adoption, especially around decision-making, right? And one of the things that I've been talking about for years is around the concept of decision velocity. Let's talk a little bit more about this, right? There's a Oracle study that's been talking about some of these concepts. You've been talking about these areas that are important. What's happening in the space? I mean, everyone's trying to make sense of it, and it is moving super fast.
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say that just like most things, there'll be a hype cycle in AI as well. There'll be tons and tons of startups that will be funded here. And many feature companies, not like real platform companies or product companies, but a lot of feature companies building on top of an existing system record, trying to do this, there'll be 10, 20, $30 million revenues for these companies. But I feel like if you go back in time to the 1990s, Oracle couldn't get the internet right. I mean, they were doing SAP and Oracle couldn't get the internet right. They were doing on-prem business software. Here comes Salesforce and says, this is how you really use the internet, And then you look at 2010s and beyond, and people said cloud native, that's the SaaS 2.0 that happened. I feel like AI right now is like the internet, and it cannot be retrofitted into an existing code base. And this is where the real magic will begin, where we can take an empty canvas approach to things and say, look, if you have to really build a system of record that's engaging, just like Slack was engaging, and it's intelligent because it is sentient and prescient, it actually knows a lot about your enterprise. I think some great things can happen in the coming years. We were just talking about sales efficiency and all that stuff, and whether there's going to be a death of innovation with Jason. I feel like innovation will make things more efficient. So, when we're looking at sales right now, we're like, every sales rep used to ask for a human co-pilot. Like, I need an SE, I need a CSM, I need a GSI manager, I need, everything was I need an SDR, I need an ISR. I mean, look, at Nutanix, I was spending $1 billion annually in sales and marketing alone, just sales and marketing alone, to get to $1.6 billion, $7 billion. I think we could have done it for 700 million if we really had a way to think through what innovation really meant and what I think could happen with co-pilots in the future. I mean, we are thinking about putting all our knowledge base, all our product managers sort of mind share, everything that SEs know in one place. And then even though we're going after, selling chatbots and selling a support CRM and selling a product CRM, we feel like if we are not using our own chatbot to, go beyond Slack, because Slack was a place where you needed people to come and answer questions. But this has to be where deflection is happening without other people coming and crowdsourcing answers to questions itself. I think that's where a lot will happen with AI as well. We'll have a co-pilot for a product manager, a co-pilot for a CSM, a co-pilot for an SE, a co-pilot for a rep, and that innovation will make things more efficient.
That makes a lot of sense. Enhancing the contextual intelligence around the stakeholders you serve and the folks you collaborate with. And when I hear your tagline of act as one, and then I listen to you talk about the concept of co-pilots, does it feel like that the enterprise will become more autonomous, and there's a shift from orchestrating sales, service, marketing, commerce, with all these titles you mentioned, more towards choreography, where there isn't a person in charge? Like, you see a ballet dancer on a stage, the music lets them know where they need to be and the next step. There isn't a person in charge. Things are choreographed. Are we going to see process innovation and more choreography because the systems will guide us without supervisor for service and supervisor for marketing and sales and so on and so forth? I don't know if I'm taking your thoughts and
I think
in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, very valid point. I mean, I want to take a step back and quote one of my favorite sort of designers from 40, 50 years ago, Raymond Loewy. He built a lot of brands like Coca-Cola and the Greyhound and all these legendary brands that we know of today. And he was a big fan of this acronym MAYA, M-A-Y-A, most advanced yet acceptable. If you think about Google Glasses or even Oculus, I think they were most advanced, but like Google Glasses was socially awkward. Like I couldn't really just wear this, go to a party. People like balk at it, AI needs to.
It actually hurt my eye looking up too long.
Yeah,
it just wasn't acceptable. Yeah, because I'm like, I can't keep my eye looking to the corner more than a few minutes. Anyway, sorry.
And by the way, that's the biological non-acceptability of the Oculus and these glasses. And similarly, I think AI needs to go through the rigors of Maya. Like at the end of the day, it has to be most advanced yet acceptable. And I mean, if you go through what machine assists need to be, if you go and say, look, they're going to take away jobs, I think people will really say, you know what, this is an inaccurate bot. It's too arrogant. We have to fail it. But if it goes in there, a lot of these things go in as humble, because some research was done like 2 years ago. The Wall Street Journal did a research in chatbots. And they said people will fail the smartest bot in the room, who's trying to act like the smartest person in the room, because that's what most people do. Like, if you're trying to be the smartest person in the room, then the rest of society actually comes together and says, you know what, maybe you're not worth it. I think that's true for chatbots too, and that's going to be true for AI as well. Because if you think of the power of LLMs and all this data, they're still inaccurate. So we'll have to go in there and act very, very humble. The bots have to be asking for human feedback, getting reinforcement learning going, continuing to actually really get better every day as well. But I think, if you look at 5 to 7 to 10 years out, just like with the internet, it took 10 years from 1997 to really get 3G going and the mobile phone going. I think we are in this 5 to 7 year kind of horizon here, where AI will convert jobs. It will collapse some departments. Because we did create, Jason talked about the excesses of the last 4 or 5 years. I feel like a lot of SaaS companies went in and oversold, and then they worried about customer success later on. There's lots of departments we created in the last 5 years, like growth engineering and customer success management. All those things will actually need to come to some core departments like product management. They need to do customer success. They need to do growth. It cannot be like these are all separate departments doing things separately. I think the front office, if anything, has to get more product centric, and the back office has to get more customer centric. And AI can really help developers actually get more customer centric, because if Copilot is going to come and write 30, 40, 50% of their code, they'll have more time. GitHub Copilot will actually do more. We talk about this at board meetings, like what is the future of work for developers? What's the future of work for product managers,
Right.
And I feel like this orchestration that you speak of, Vala, will need to be machine assist to existing jobs. Now, we might end up going to colleges like a lot more than we have, because the younger people are actually a lot more productive than they used to be. AI can help them with a lot of this training as well.
Yeah. As the cost of content is converging to zero, and the volume is increasing, I don't know how it can't be machine assist, because how do you test the efficacy and the accuracy to ensure whatever content that's generated and you're going to share doesn't drift away from your brand promise and your core values? And it's not ready for an enterprise. Maybe it's my humble opinion, but so the humans have to be part of the process, but the volume is at such a pace that it has to. The automation and the testing of the new content has to include bots and machines. And I actually am working with. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Look, this is going to be verticalized. It's going to be extremely focused. Anybody trying to really do AI washing for the entire enterprise probably is going to fail. But like at DevRev, we are taking a very, very specific look at chatbots, support, CRM, product, and development. Like, what does it mean for this one pathway to be extremely efficient? And if one could do that well, maybe you've actually enabled developers and product managers and support engineers to really become AI ready in some.
I like the back to basics. You're naming functions that are core to successful companies. And I'm not against having different titles. Look at the chief digital evangelist, but product management, product marketing, these folks all success is not something you delegate to. It's a team sport. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
I was explaining to my son, there are these real jobs. They're called product. They're called sales. They're called marketing, right? Maybe. And if you're not on the product side, if you're not building product or you're not selling product, everything is overhead. Yes. I was trying to explain to him, like, that's how it used to be. So, but we're finally back to that. But hey, related to that, there's a good point here, right? We're operating at machine scale, yet we're humans, and we've got to figure out how that balance is going to occur, right? And the exponential amount of misinformation, disinformation being created by a chat GPT or generative AI is concerning. So what are we doing to improve that precision, that training to get to that, last percent? And what I mean is like, getting 99.1% accurate in healthcare is probably not good enough, right? People are going to want a lot more than that. 87% accurate on self-help and chats, right? And CRM. Yeah, I'll take that. That's better than what we're doing now with our contact center agents, right? And so finding that amount of data, like, how do we know if we have enough data? How do we know if we're doing the training the right way? What are you doing to improve that?
Yeah, first of all, if you take a look at where AI will be, especially stuff that's not 100% exact, there's this degree of exactitude in departments too, in any company. If in a certain department, the cost of error is low, and the cost of recall is low. I mean, if you go back to the 80s, hardware versus software, the cost of recall of hardware was really high.
Sure.
So you had to be really, really good at your VHDL, your tape outs. I mean, there was just a lot of hard work, and it used to take 18 months to roll out a new chip or an ASIC. I think software was very different because the cost of recall was low as well. I think we'll see that with departments. There will be departments where if you go wrong and you have to restate revenue, then you might go to jail for that too. But there are other places where you don't have to be 100% right, which is where AI will be used more, because the cost of error is low, the cost of recall is actually going to be low. And of course, I mean, look, going back to the 2007, 8, 9, 10 timeframe, I mean, social media, there was a lot of stuff that was fake and was probably copyright violated and so on. And we came up with things like, okay, fine, it's going to be a safe harbor. And if somebody comes and complains about my content being on YouTube, YouTube will actually take it down. We'll see a lot of that stuff come around here as well, where people will actually be willing to live with the errors, provided AI acts humbly to the human. It says, look,
the humbleness is key.
Humbleness
is very
and
key.
Second thing is, in a lot of creative jobs where people have a writer's block, because an empty canvas and a writer's block results in procrastination. Like a lot of people procrastinate because, like, I don't know where to begin. The machine can be your chief of staff, can be your assistant to really do that stuff early on. And I think those are the places we'll see a lot more usage. While for other things, we'll still have structured data, you'll still have analytics, you'll still have exactitude, data warehouses and lake houses and all the things that we've talked about in the last 10 years.
You've mentioned the word humility a couple times on this conversation. I love that because you're incredibly successful executive, founder. How do you mentor? As a sponsor, how do you ensure, especially when you've had your success, company's grown, it's acquired, it's the most successful IPO of 2016. How do you stay humble? The founder of my company keeps reminding us to maintain a beginner's mindset. Trust is our number one core value. I have a very specific definition of trust, but I don't think I have a great definition of humility. Can you share with us, give some advice to other founders who are watching, who aspire to reach your level of success? How do you stay grounded?
Well, I still have a long ways to go in terms of what knowledge and success and making an impact, making a dent in the universe actually means.
I love that.
But thank you for the kindness. I have a really good mentor in Mike Robbins, and he's the author of a book called "Be Yourself Because Everyone Else Is Taken." And he talks about the word vulnerability a lot, just like Brené Brown does. But the one word that I've come to learn in the last 10 years is authenticity. And he said it's actually a continuum. It's a spectrum. On the left of the spectrum is just dishonest people. The middle of the spectrum is honest people, and that gives you a pause. Like, are you saying honesty is not good enough? And then he says, you got to take something out of honesty and add something to honesty to make it authentic, which is the right of the spectrum. What you take out is self-righteousness, which is just because I'm right means you're wrong. That's whole zero-sum mindset.
Yeah.
And then what you add to it is vulnerability. Like, I don't know enough and I might be wrong and all that. I think, that spectrum, really reminds me a lot about what I need to do differently every day. Because, as a hard charging founder, you come in every day and all you need is results and outcomes and so on. But then you end up thinking about inputs and people and process and, what do you need to be patient about? What do you need to be impatient about? Because, there's always this balance between opposites when you're doing companies. But again, if you are the true north of everything is how do you take out self-righteousness? How do you bring in vulnerability? And then you're going from just being honest to being authentic, and that's been
Dheeraj, this is a TED Talk. I was not expecting such an in-depth answer. Wow.
I think
that's
awesome.
And
these reminders actually help me. Like, I step out of this room, hopefully I remember to be less self-righteous and more vulnerable.
That was wow. So, yeah, that I'm going to be rewatching this show on the weekend, and this point's going to stay with me. Sorry, Ray. I wasn't expecting such a deep answer. That was
No,
an
it's
impromptu question. That's awesome. Great. Sorry.
no
Wow.
problem.
I love that. And Brené
but hey,
Brown. I mean, the folks you mentioned are amazing. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
But we are seeing definitely a shift that's going on, right? I mean, market's different, the environment's different, the customer set's different. What about the teams that you're putting together? What's changing in leadership, right? I mean, we got a moment to talk to you about leadership, and you've been an amazing leader in so many different companies, and also, in charities and other organizations around the Bay Area. What's changing in leadership? What are you seeing there, right? And what are people looking more for?
I think this question of authentic leadership, is very important.
Yeah.
When I look at Nutanix, we had 6,000, 7,000 people in the company, and at every step of the way, I used to think about how our leaders. We used to have these 3 H's, and I've carried that over to DevRev now: hungry, humble, and honest. What does it mean to be hungry, humble, and honest?
Yep.
Easy to remember. And the 4th one that I've added is happy, because starting from teenage years.
No, it makes sense.
I mean, it's simple. Even in Japan, one can remember what hungry, humble, and honest actually mean. Simple values. But I think leadership also needs to do the 3 things to become, happy as well. It's sleep well, breathe well, and smile more. I think if leadership is not sleeping well, because we have 6 offices. We have India, we have Slovenia, we have Argentina, we have here Austin. There's a lot that's going on, and people are doing early morning meetings and late night meetings. I think leadership needs to really bring through this idea that the only way we can actually get folks to bring their whole self to the company, it's got to be with the sleep well. And I tell people, if you're doing late night meetings, don't do the early morning ones, because that's the only way to really build a remote company. Otherwise, we can't have it all.
Right.
Yep.
I love that.
No, we're definitely seeing that.
That's the authenticity in your answers. I can tell that what you think and what you say and what you do are aligned. And I just met you, but I definitely feel the authenticity in your response. So I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. Really do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're here with Dheeraj Pandey, CEO and co-founder of DevRev, and of course, legendary startup entrepreneur, and of course, leader here in the Silicon Valley. You can follow him on Twitter at Dheeraj, Dheeraj, early adopter of Twitter, definitely. So thanks a lot for being on the show, and happy Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
We're getting blown away everywhere today. I mean,
and of course,
amazing thoughts.
Our long distance award goes to our final guest, who we're interrupting his at dinner time, Paulo Savaget, author of 4 Workarounds. Paul is the author of the 4 Workarounds, associate professor at Oxford University's Engineering Science Department and the SET Business School. Paulo holds a PhD from University of Cambridge as a Gates Scholar and has a background working as a lecturer, consultant, entrepreneur, researcher, finding innovative solutions for more inclusive world. I love that, more inclusive. As an immigrant refugee, I love that. As a consultant, he works on projects for large companies, non-profits, government agencies in Latin America and the OECD. He currently resides in Oxford. So again, thank you for joining us late. Paul's new book, The 4 Workarounds, Strategies from the World's Scrappiest, I love that, organizations for tackling complex problems. You can follow Paulo on Twitter at PaulOSavaget. Welcome, Paulo, to DisrupTV.
Thank you very much for hosting me. Very excited to talk to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Same here.
Hey, well, happy Friday. Welcome. Let's start with the basic question. What is a workaround?
A workaround is an imperfection-loving, problem-solving approach that I've learned actually from computer hackers. I got very curious about how computer hackers were hacking all sorts of complex systems, these computational systems. And I started wondering whether we could approach complex problems in all the systems, let's say in education systems, healthcare, and so on, with a very hacky approach. And as I engage with computer hackers studying them, I realized that the essence of their approach is that they work around all sorts of obstacles that lie in their way. So, for example, a Trojan horse, that is one of the most notorious computer hacks, represents a bit that idea, right? You don't have to break into the walls or the gates of a walled city to get in. You may find more unconventional, ingenious ways. And that was the beginning of the research. But a workaround challenges the conventions on how a problem is meant to be solved, and also by whom a problem is meant to be solved.
And your book, you reference 4 types of workarounds. Now, was it spending time with computer hackers? That was the catalyst for the idea? How did you come up with the idea? And then please explain to us the 4 different types.
Sure, thank you. Yes, it was actually from computer hackers. I had worked for many years as a consultant, as an entrepreneur, and as a consultant, I worked in many different places with, for example, traditional populations in the Amazon, but also with very large companies. And I realized that my reports were getting very similar. So in some ways, I was frustrated with myself, considering that I was giving recommendations in very different settings. And these recommendations relied on more alignment, more coordination, more collaboration, and things that are not wrong, right? I would never say that these things are wrong, but they were very generic, and I was overlooking other ways of making change. Then I decided to look at hackers and study hackers to see how they approached problems in computer systems. And that's how I ended up finding that hacking is not only exclusive to computer systems, but it can be used in all sorts of systems. And also that workaround is at the essence. So let me give you an example to materialize that a little bit, what a workaround entails or can possibly entail. And it's the first workaround that I call the piggyback. One of the examples that I use in the book is from an organization that I worked with in Zambia. And they wanted to address the lack of access to diarrhea treatment in very remote regions. Remote regions lack some basic products, but you can actually find other sorts of products like from fast-moving consumer goods, for example, like Coca-Cola. So instead of addressing the bottlenecks preventing medicines from being found in these remote regions, this very small, scrappy organization worked around these obstacles by piggybacking on Coca-Cola distribution chain, literally fitting medicines between bottles in a crate to take a free ride to these remote regions. Because if Coca-Cola is found there, why can't we take free rides for medicines that will save lives?
Love it.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty much. So then you call this piggyback.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the idea that you don't have to address a problem in healthcare only by addressing through the means of healthcare, the traditional, conventional ways of approaching problems in that system. You can benefit from what already exists in fast-moving consumer goods. You can find unconventional pairings to get a lot of things done. There's already so much potential, so much stuff out there. Why can't we bridge across these silos?
Sure. You talk about scrappiness. I'm sorry, Ray. You talk about this. You define it as scrappy organizations. Can you teach scrappiness? How does the DNA of a culture of a company look? When I think of scrappiness, I think about grit. I think about resourcefulness. I think about optimism, pragmatic optimism, or maybe just optimism. What's your definition of scrappy?
It's exactly what you said. I'm amazed that we have exactly the same view of scrappy, and that's how I defined scrappy organizations. I would just add that these scrappy organizations are sometimes or most times in the fringes, right, of power structures. They're not necessarily the IBMs or the Googles of the world, but perhaps these Google and IBM were once scrappy organizations that were being very resourceful, sometimes out of necessity. We had some brilliant discussions earlier today, right, with your other guest speakers that discussed a little bit these early stages of startups. And many of them have to be scrappy to succeed. And I have cases, for example, of Airbnb or TransferWise, now called Wise, and how they worked around obstacles to grow, for example, exponentially.
Amazing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about the loophole workaround, right? This is a very interesting one, and really talk about how these can benefit underdogs rather than the people that are entrenched or in power or have all the advantages. Because this is a fun workaround, and let's go deep on that.
Yeah, and it's also the most controversial one from all the four.
Very controversial, yes.
Yeah, because it's about working around rules. So if the first one is about relationships, the second one is about rules. Let me give an example to illustrate that a little bit. There's an organization that I studied that is based in the Netherlands, and it's an organization of feminist women that is pro-choice. They think that women should be allowed to get an abortion service if they want on demand, right? That's how they started. And they realized that what constrains women from getting a safe abortion service is and legal abortion service is where they reside. So, for example, if they are in Poland, they cannot get an abortion service, but if they are here in the UK, they can. In the United States, now it depends on the states, right? It's pretty much the legislation that constrains women from getting these safe and legal abortions. So what did they do to work around that? They got a boat from the Netherlands, where a country that is pro-choice, and they sail to places where abortion is illegal. Let's say they go to Poland. And then women who want to get an abortion service go on board and they sail to international waters, which is not that far from the coastline. It's like less than half an hour most times. And then they can provide a safe and legal abortion service because the legislation that applies in international waters is the one of the flag of the boat. And because it's Dutch, it's the legislation from the Netherlands that it's pro-choice. So they can provide the service and take them back to the countries where they reside.
When you're teaching students about these concepts, what type of mindset do you try to instill in them? What type of mindset is required to recognize that there's potential opportunity for a workaround and experiment with the workaround? And again, I'd mentioned a beginner's mindset. I assume if you're free of prejudice, if you're curious. If anyone who's a parent of a young child, I think that children probably have the right mindset to look for workarounds. So what's the type of mindset that you need to cultivate in order to be successful with workarounds?
Workarounds, I learned from scrappy organizations, and there's a reason why these scrappy organizations excel in working around all sorts of obstacles. And you mentioned, for example, children being prone to workarounds, and some people that are very creative in assembling resources in different ways, recombining them, finding different pairings, rethinking or challenging, deviating from rules that might be enforced on them. So there are some people that are very prone, or that from whom I found many cases of workarounds. But what I learned throughout my research is that everyone actually works around the obstacles to different extents, and that these are muscles that we can train, we can exercise, we can get better at working around. And that's one of the things that I show in my book. So, for example, one of the mindsets that I think is very important is to realize that in complex situations, a complicated solution is really bad. Simple is good in complicated situations. And workarounds are simple. They are very graceful and effective and ways of approaching problems. It's kind of like the low-hanging fruit of problem solving. But there's no problem in a low-hanging fruit if it's tasty fruit and it's reachable and it's gonna feed you, right? That's the essence. And it can allow for very big and structural change later on. Companies that have become huge, for example, after working around many obstacles that they faced, or people who changed entire legislations, like in the United States. I show a case of Ruth Bader Ginsburg working around some challenges that she had when she was a lawyer before she became a Supreme Court justice, and that toppled down a system of sex-based discrimination. Workarounds are accessible, right? They are simple ways of getting things done that open up many future possibilities for change making.
Oh, this is amazing. And one of the other concepts you talk about is the power of the outside, right? How does that work? And how taking that perspective could actually give you potentially another workaround. Let's start there.
Exactly. When we work as insiders, we get numb to the ways of getting things done. And this won't be a surprise to all of you, right? There's a certain way of getting things done in our daily lives as well, not only in our workplaces. I have my way of cooking pasta, right? I never challenge my way of cooking pasta. I will criticize people that do.
We will never debate an Oxford professor on pasta cooking. We would lose.
Exactly,
so, yes. That's awesome.
But the good thing about outsiders is that they come with fresh eyes. They can challenge these norms. They are not numb to the way of getting things done. And that allows them to find different pairings, for example, or rethink the way we use resources in ways that are unconventional in that setting. That's why outsiders can be very good at finding workarounds. And we can also stimulate this outsider mindset. And it's something that I try to bring in the book as well.
Well, should companies be encouraging their teams to actually focus on workarounds at scale? Like, is that something that you would say is, going to be a leadership mandate where people actually go out and say, we're looking for innovation. Let's actually focus on workarounds. Do you see that happening?
I do see that happening. And actually, there's some companies that have already institutionalized one of the workarounds that became very prominent. For example, HP, 3M, Google, they all have these policies now that allow for people to dedicate 15 or 20% of their times for their personal innovative projects, right? Yeah. Many of these policies came from people that were working around the direct orders from their bosses to work on the projects that they believed in, but their bosses didn't believe in. That includes, for example, aspirin was developed that way. Blue LED lights were also developed that way. Large screen displays also. Many technologies that we love and use came from people that were working around direct orders from their bosses. and that's something that companies have built on. They realize the importance of allowing people to build on the passion and the drive to create innovation.
I love that. I mean, you implied, and I agree with you, that as companies become bigger, they're not as scrappy. And I don't know, it's been said, people are not afraid of failure, they're afraid of blame. And I wonder, when companies get bigger and the decisions become greater magnitude in terms of right or wrong or different shades of good, better, best, that people don't have the safe space to experiment with workarounds because they are in a culture of blame and finger pointing when something goes wrong. Imagine companies you mentioned, public companies that are living 90 day by 90 day with earnings calls and this, that, and the other. So my question is, how important is this safe space and a culture where you don't blame experimentation? In fact, you view experimentation as part of the learning process. How much of that is required in order for large companies not to lose their scrappiness?
Yeah, I would actually take that a step further and say that workarounds are actually good to disrupt these cultures that do not allow for people or hinder the innovation drive of the staff. So, for example, some of the cases that I covered in the book, I show how by working around orders from the bosses, they created a safe space where they could develop the innovation to the point that it was ripe to be presented publicly. In the beginning of an innovation project, what happens very often, and I'm sure you all innovators and entrepreneurs know that the idea is very rough. It's difficult to convince others that it will be successful because it might make sense to you, but it might not necessarily be very well aligned with the corporate strategies, or it might be difficult to convince other people that have the decision power. So if you work around, you can buy time to dedicate to your project and develop it to the point that it becomes more attractive to others as well. And then you go public, you can convince them how the project should be invested in and invite other people to work on that project also. So this is just one of the examples, but workarounds can be very disruptive of these sorts of cultures. These cultures that normalize a situation where people feel very constrained, that they feel like nothing's possible. It's not worth investing in something new. Just work from 9 to 5 and off you go. Right. That's these are cultures that are kind of good to work around because we can disrupt that and try to change.
For sure. It's just like delicious pasta. You got to let it simmer a little bit. You got to be patient, and you got to, all ideas are super fragile at birth. No question. Even the great ones.
In innovation, when I teach my classes here in innovation, we describe them as hopeful monstrosities. They are hopeful, but they're monstrous, right? Like, but you got to reach that moment that the hope trumps the monstrous nature of these early stage ideas.
So, Paulo, this is actually a very important concept around workarounds. And the reason I'm very excited about this is in a world of AI where the rules are very rigid, very black and white, right? We're going to need a ton more workarounds, right? I mean, that whole notion of actually augmenting the machine with a human and working side by side, right? I mean, the machine is going to be learning about all these workarounds because human behavior isn't linearly mapped, right? We don't follow those patterns. And it's very interesting when we try to organize around very rigid processes. And hopefully by the end of this, we'll actually get to the workarounds that actually, maybe define humanity as opposed to define where we are at an AI level. What do you think about that?
That's a great thought. I would say that if a workaround becomes the status quo, it's no longer a workaround. A
Exactly.
workaround has to challenge that status quo. And if we eventually see AIs, for example, suggesting workarounds, we're going to have to come up with workarounds for that, for these workarounds to become institutionalized.
The escalation workaround war.
Wow. So your belief is that if the end state is robot generated or algorithmic generated workarounds, knowing that all the data that's ingested into the, let's say, large language model is not going to produce creative, like completely new way of thinking. It's most likely massaging other thoughts and principles. Then that would require time for a workaround. That's
I think it opens
introducing the anticipatory workaround.
What I would say is that it opens possibilities. So let me give a different example, an analogous experience that is not AI, but it's more reality for us now. But it was very dystopian, perhaps 15 years ago. Now a lot of people have cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin was a workaround to the financial system that is centralized by the central bank and around the world, right? That's a workaround that followed a bunch of workarounds, people working around the FBI, the NSA, and so on to develop cyber technologies. If crypto eventually became the new norm, it will have originated from a workaround, but it's no longer a workaround to a financial system if it becomes a new norm of the financial system, right? But I'm sure that a lot of people will come up with workarounds for that. If that becomes, it's going to be a workaround to crypto, right? Workarounds challenge conventions on how things should be done, or the conventions of systems, and also who should be the ones addressing problems, or who should be the ones doing things in a certain way. It's defined in essence. Yeah, it has to be defined.
Great. And now when I think of all the bad actors over the last 2 years, their workaround of a decentralized framework was to try to centralize it more, and then they didn't, have trust as their core value, and it reiterated the importance of we need to maintain that decentralization and ensure that one actor can't tumble a market. Sorry, I don't want to get into the crypto, but that was a great analogy. We have witnessed, as Ray and I are crypto people, lots of workarounds that didn't work around and more workarounds, and it's
the cold wallet is the workaround.
It's workaround. It's like stacking workarounds, right? That sometimes allow for the development of entirely new systems or business models.
Really true.
No, we're saying that. We're with Paulo Savaget, author of the 4 Workarounds. You can follow him on Twitter at Paulo Savaget. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and, of course, this innovative rule of workarounds.
Congrats on the book. Thank you, sir.
Congratulations. Cheers. You can get the book on Amazon, available March 3rd. So very cool. And you're not asking me to summarize this, are you?
No, but I'm just saying every one of our guests, Jason, Dheeraj, Paulo, I'm not going to take notes fast enough with any of our guests and all the incredible. If you could, maybe in 30 seconds, summarize, that would be great, because I know our audience benefits from your wisdom.
Oh, great. Thanks. No, hey, look, I mean, the funding environment is very interesting, and we're getting back to basics. And Jason's definitely right about that. We've been lost in an era of cheap capital, cheap money. People actually believed in MMT. That actually created really perverse behaviors, right? Things that didn't work in terms of what we see as natural laws of physics. But that environment may actually create much better startups, much more innovative startups, and much more disciplined startups. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where that's headed, right? But one of the biggest things
productivity as the North North Star, with productivity.
Yeah,
as the
productivity is North
Star.
Star, massive efficiency, right? And hopefully, societal productivity. The thing that's interesting to me the most is that AI will change the way these startups work and really change the way how we see those efficiencies. And really that takes us to the next part, really about what's happening next. I mean, Dheeraj really shared with us in terms of thinking about where that future is going to look like, right? What are we going to see in terms of how we actually maybe apply generative AI to a business problem? What we actually have to do, thinking about entrepreneurship, right? What does that new leadership look like? We're looking at a new set of leaders with that level of experience. And I think, if these systems fail us, what Paulo is saying is basically these workarounds will be here. And you know what? We're going to get even more innovative. And so I see this episode as the episode really talking about where a culture of abundance is shifting to a culture of scarcity, forcing us to become a little bit more innovative, a little bit more scrappy, and a little bit more authentic. So I'll leave that with you.
Great summary. Great summary. Next week, we will have Paul Sheard, author of Power of Money. He's the former vice chairman of S&P Global. If you love economics and money, this is your guy.
Yes.
Sue Watts, president of Sapiens Analytics, and Phil Simon, author of The Nine, The Tectonic Forces Reshaping the Workplace. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. We're approaching 1,000 guests in the next 2 weeks. So
who will be the 1,000th guest?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Paul Doherty. But I need to double check my counts. But of Accenture. But if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching. Ray, safe travels back from Dubai, and we'll see you next Friday. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see folks in the green room. Bye.
Bye.